Okay.
Yeah, that's it. We just finished.
Italian mother?
Current, no, we're
Yeah,
really
it's
good. We had to
Is your Italian mother? Yes.
no, current.
Ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to be audio recording.
Okay.
I'm going to send you after the fact and release it, but just an FYI.
All right. That's
I'm about to try the
important.
Just an FYI.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Oh, you mean, yeah, for the Q&A. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Hi. We're about to begin. My name's Dwana Butler. I'm the program director here at New York Women. Thank you, Kim. She's a paid supporter, no. Yes, I'm program director for New York Women in Film and Television. And for anyone who's new to NYWIFT, otherwise known as NYWIFT, we're a membership organization, 2,400 members and counting, women and men. A number of men ask me, can I join? Yes, we have a number of men in our membership. Yes. We have 4 different areas that we focus on. What we're doing this evening: career development, advancement, networking, education. We preserve women's films through our Women's Film Preservation Fund. I like to put that up at the top because it's really important that we preserve our legacy. We advocate for equality in the business. We have a huge event coming up towards the end of our season in June. Look out for that. So we'll address issues of equality in the business. And we also celebrate women's achievements. In May 22nd, Designing Women is coming, and we celebrate women in hair, makeup, costume design, glam teams for film and television. So look out for that announcement. It's coming up shortly. We're also part of 50 chapters globally of women in film chapters, so we are the New York chapter. For our doc series, we're really excited to be back here. We were here 2 weeks ago. And in the spring, we do a series for documentaries, 4 different programs. So our members produce our events, and we're really excited to get around to really important topics for this industry, for filmmakers making doc work. I also wanted to say, if you really enjoy this program and other programs you've been to or just having your first exposure to it, do consider becoming a member of NYWIFT. We have a spring drive right now. It's 50% off of our initiation fee, so people usually look out for that. Again, men can join as well, our allies. We have membership information about programs for NYWIFT, and more information about the organization as well. And after our program, we do go over to Phoebe's, which is diagonally across the street, to continue the conversation. With that said, I'm really excited to welcome, and to pay tribute to our moderator for this evening, Marsha Rock, Director of News and Documentary here at the Journalism Institute. And she's also the chair of our documentary committee, which is a committee of members of NYWIFT that get together in September and plan these 4 different programs that we do in the spring. We've been discussing this program for a year. We had the idea about it last June, and here we are. So I'm really excited to see this happening. We have an amazing, amazing panel. So with that said, I hand off to Marsha Rock.
So it's very exciting to have such a fantastic panel, and you can see we have a surfeit of riches tonight. And I see some familiar faces. So I think the continuity is really terrific. We started in February with a case study of swim team with Laura Stolman, and she has mentioned quite a few of the organizations that are here today. And then we followed it up with proposal writing last month, which was really terrific. And tonight we have Incubator Lab. So we're diving a little deeper into the documentary process tonight and how you can get some great help. And then May 6th will be our last event, and that's distribution, I think, 3.0. I'm not quite sure. We're still adding to that panel and finalizing it. So keep your eyes out for the NYWIFT website for the people who will be on that panel. So tonight is Documentary Incubator Labs, and Some have been around a long time and some have not. Some have started only 5 years ago. When I was doing my first documentary, there were none. So you were all very lucky to have the opportunity to apply to these great organizations that try to help you develop your documentary idea. And on the panel tonight, I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we're going to go through each organization and learn about what they're doing and how they're different, and ask a few questions and then open it up to you. So Milton Tabbitt is the Senior Director of Programming at the Independent Feature Project, IFP, in New York City, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. His responsibilities include supervising all documentary programs. He is also on the review panels for BritDoc Foundation's Good Pitch, PBS's POV series, and CoPro, the Israel Documentary Screen Market. He served as a writer, editor, and film programmer for the first 2 years of the Tribeca Film Institute, and is a contributing writer for the Miami International Film Festival, and has also...
In the past.
Oh, okay. Okay, and has served on juries for Full Frame, Big Sky, Doc NYC, Atlanta, Ashland, and True False Film Festivals. So he's a big deal. We're really lucky to have him. Okay, Kirsten Johnson, who teaches here. We are very excited that she's one of our faculty members, but she's on leave this year, I hope not for more, to work on her hybrid documentary about life and death. She's had a prestigious career as a camera person on important films like Pray the Devil Back to Hell and Citizen 4. And then she produced Camera Person, that premiered at Sundance in 2016 and was shortlisted for an Academy Award. It also won the National Board of Review Freedom of Expression Prize and was named one of the top 10 films of 2016.
That was awesome.
Yay!
It's like so great when they forget the boundary between documentary and fiction and just say film.
Yes, and we can't wait to see what she's doing with that. So then we have Lucilla Moctezuma. She's the Director of Programs at Chicken and Egg Pictures. She oversees the planning and implementation of the organization's programs in support of women, nonfiction filmmakers. Okay, and then we have Monica Navarro, who just left ITVS to join Tribeca Film Institute, where she oversees documentary, scripted education, and interactive programs. She's had more than a decade of experience producing for public media, from directing her debut film Lost Souls, which premiered on Independent Lens, to producing for World Channel, American Documentary, and Latino Americans. And Christopher Allen, founder, artistic director of Union Docs. Those in Brooklyn, I'm sure, know all about Union Docs. The projects he's initiated include Living Los Sures, documenting mythologies, Capital of Punk, and Yellow Arrow. He also collaborates on live performances such as Say Something Bunny with artist ASM Kobayashi. And Union Docs has some really terrific laboratories. So, Chris, why don't we start with you?
All right. Hi, everyone. Where am I starting? Do we want to show this video? That would be great. I think there should be audio. Yeah, no worries. We can vamp, yeah. So NewsDoc is a Center for Documentary Art. We're a nonprofit in Brooklyn and in Williamsburg, and in addition to events and workshops, we also do 3 different labs for 36 artists a year. We have a 10-month program called the Collaborative Studio, which is geared towards bringing 12 artists together to work on a thematic production. So people are making short films together over the course of 10 months and engaging in master classes and seminars on the history, theory, and practice of documentary art. And then we have 2 summer labs, which this video will describe one of them, but those are, the first summer lab is for pre-production, and the second is for research and development. The first is 5 weeks long, and it's very intensive. It's 10 to 6 every day, and the second is 3 weeks long, and I can explain a little bit of the difference between the two. Thanks.
The intensive is really designed to be this special moment where a filmmaker can, within a very tightly structured environment, think through every aspect of their project all the way through its final phase in distribution and reaching an audience.
So much of the documentary world requires us as filmmakers to be both directors and producers. This is the type of program that really helps you realize that that's all possible. It really empowers you with a knowledge and understanding of how the industry works so that you can really take your film and have the most ambitious plans possible for it.
We can use the participants' projects to rethink documentary, to show films that are pertinent to their interest, to the forms of documentary that we want to focus on, and I think that generates a very interesting space to think about documentary, to create documentary, and to learn about it.
NewsDoc always brings together a very interesting group of people, and making a documentary film can be a lonely task. So having a community of supportive colleagues, it's a resource that filmmakers can have for life.
We're bringing the group together every day to do masterclasses with filmmakers, editors, industry folks, distributors, funders, where the group could have a really open and frank conversation with them to hear about their experiences and also to ask questions and for the participants to actually share what they were working on and get advice from these folks, critiques and workshops. So once or twice a week, really taking time to go over the participants' own work, especially the samples that they're using to pitch the project, whether that's a trailer, a treatment, or a verbal pitch. Field trips, taking the group out once a week to some of the awesome documentary organizations and funders and distributors in the city. And New York has so much going on in terms of documentary and the documentary industry.
Seminars happen with writers, academics, and programmers who discuss theory and practice of documentary filmmaking. And the work featured is provocative and groundbreaking as a way for the participants to learn new ways of documentary filmmaking and applying that to their own work.
We can choose filmmakers and documentary practitioners to come through and speak one-on-one to the people at the lab, so we can address their specific needs in terms of forms of documentary processes, artistic processes. So it's this very tailor-made process that makes it very special.
This is an opportunity to take 5 weeks to just really focus and develop this idea. It's intense and there's lots of deadlines, but people come out with real results. They come out with a whole new vision for this project and a whole set of practical tools for taking their project to the next stage. It's also about joining NewsDoc as a whole, as becoming part of the broader community here, and we do our best to continue to support projects as we can in the future.
Maybe one thing I'll just add to that is I think it's appropriate to start it because in some ways we're a feeder to these other labs. We start with projects that are in earlier stages, and we've been very lucky to see many of our participants receive funding or positions in some of these other labs that are focused on projects that are a little bit further along. So it's a nice partnership, and it does make sense maybe to start with that.
What kind of projects are you looking for?
So for the summer labs, we're looking for feature documentaries in early stages of development. Our pre-production lab, you need to have access to the beginnings of a story. You need to have the beginnings of footage. you don't need to have fully developed this, and you need to be in a space where you're willing to think through your idea in a major way, because people often come into the lab with one concept of what their narrative is and leave with another after those 5 weeks. For the research and development lab, it can be much more in a concept and idea formation phase. There, we're not working with media as much as we're working with writing. And so over the course of the 3 weeks, you leave with what is essentially the core documentary application, a grant proposal, and that has been workshopped through the lab. So, yeah.
And how do you apply? Do you submit an essay? What do you need to know about your project to apply?
Yeah, so for all of our labs, it's based on both previous work and the proposal for the project that you're involved in right now. There's written samples, usually media samples as well, and recommendations. And I should say that officially our application periods for both labs, for both summer labs and for the collaborative studio are closed, but if anyone is interested, they just closed actually on Friday. If you're interested to apply, you can write at info@uniondocs.org, and we'll give you an extension to submit an application. And the last important detail too for ours, which is not such a detail, is that our labs have a program fee that come along with that. So people pay to participate. It's 10 to 6, and there's a huge amount of resources. So in some ways, it's very much like a combination of film school and a kind of crash course in film school and a film lab. And the fees are kept really low, and often people who are entering the program get scholarships or other funding to support those fees, and we work with filmmakers to try to make that happen as much as possible.
And one more question: do you welcome new filmmakers, or are you looking for more experienced?
Yeah, we're really interested in working with first-time directors. We will have people who've made successful first films or into second films, third films sometimes, who've also found this lab to be really useful as a space for incubation and development of their ideas. But we're absolutely open to first-time filmmakers. It's not a place to, often people have done a successful short or participated as a producer, maybe are moving from working as a cinematographer to taking on their first directing project. So some experience, of course, is required, but first-time directors definitely welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Monica.
Hi, so I'm Monica Navarro, and thanks for the nice introduction. I recently joined Tribeca Film Institute, and we have a host of programs. Our website there's a lot there. We're going to be doing a redesign this year, so forgive us that but there's also a lot of information. I will say before we start with this is I want to talk about some other iterations of labs that we've had, just so you can kind of get an idea of the work that we do. Because I'll dig in more into the Camden TFI Retreat, which we do in partnership with Points North Institute, and I believe Kirsten has been a mentor. In every June in Camden, Maine. But we've also had, for the past 5 years, a 3-day doc lab with A&E called the A&E Story Lab. And that's been really successful as a super intensive 3-day lab with mentors and less projects. We would select that in partnership with our partners at A&E. And so they would weigh in a bit on the curation. And if you look at some of the films that have been in A&E indie films, they tend to be a bit more like commercially viable or crowd pleasing. They've supported Matthew Heinemann's films and RBG. Sorry, is that CNN? Sorry, but sorry, Jesus Camp. So films that you can see what's going to be a wide appeal for a broadcaster like A&E. I don't know if that lab will continue because Molly Thompson just got hired at Apple to run their doc division, which is super exciting. Maybe we'll have an Apple lab. I would love that, but I would say that that's been such a successful lab that we will continue it. I would say TFI is all about partnership. So if you look at a lot of our labs, they're done in partnership with other institutes or other programs or festivals and markets. So I hope we take that 3-day lab and you'll see it in some other iteration, but I just wanted to be clear, you probably won't see the A&E Story Lab next year, but a 3-day lab like that in the winter we hope to bring back. We also do a lot of labs throughout Latin America and other parts of the world with partners. So And those sometimes there will be an exchange where maybe one project is selected and comes to the TFI network, which is the 2-day market we do every year at the Tribeca Film Festival. And we also send some of our own alumni to those exchanges and markets throughout the world. So we've had a presence in Latin America. We've worked in the Middle East and North Africa through Greenhouse. We recently started working in Turkey with the Istanbul Cinema Network, because doc filmmakers there are facing a lot of censorship and lack of funding for their work, so it's very risky just to be a doc maker there right now. But I would say here, if you're in the US, but there may be folks that are international that would be, you'll see, relevant to. If you see that we have some partnerships, you should look into those programs because we're doing labs throughout other parts of the world. I would say the one that will continue right now is the Camden TFI Retreat. So why don't we maybe show the video for that?
There's a need to clarify what the American story is.
American society and culture and politics are going through these really profound transformations right now, and there's a lot of filmmakers that are out there on the front lines and kind of capturing that zeitgeist.
The theme of the Camden TFI Retreat is American stories. It was born out of this idea that the Tribeca Film Institute, the Points North Institute, and CNN Films had.
CNN Films started as a way to sort of make people understand that CNN was more than just headlines. And this workshop really fits exactly into that desire.
Maine sort of forces you to slow down and to think more deeply and to connect more deeply.
Out of the city and out of the distractions of their everyday lives, the environment really allows people to understand what is really important to them, how to really hone in on what they're doing.
We work with Tribeca Film Institute and CNN Films on trying to find a diverse, robust group of mentors who can speak to just about every aspect of the filmmaking process.
We tackle story structure, delving into post-production.
When they're going through the very messy middle, which is most of making a film,
is a kaleidoscopic portrait of life in Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria.
It's about people who want to live forever but have sacrificed their ability to be present and to live the life that's in front of them.
Small town in southern New Mexico. In the 1950s, they voted to rename themselves after the most popular game show of the time.
Zach Ibrahim, he is the son of a terrorist involved in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
The film takes place in the small town of Rutland, Vermont, at the intersection of the opioid crisis and refugee resettlement.
These filmmakers have incredible projects. They have access, they have stories, they have characters, and they have a vision.
The mentors don't just deal with the practical, they're also being really honest about the emotional. We are all here doing our life's work.
Very personally, my career was so grateful and reliant on mentorship. That is how careers are built.
I think it's very, very important to showcase your work at stages along the way, pivot and tweak and make adjustments that will make for a much better product.
Go in the morning and you do your workshops, and it's incredibly seamlessly put together.
It was people really trying to listen to what we were trying to do and then try and do that for each other.
And we as mentors are here not to pilot their planes, but to kind of serve as air traffic control.
Like all the organizers help the filmmakers create a sense of community that's phenomenal.
There are always these moments of just genuine connection.
That we can really be honest with each other about our stories, making sure that we were all kind of really there for each other in our own particular quests.
So I would say whereas our 3-day story lab was sort of that at a small scale and really intense, to have folks would be a little bit earlier in their stage, maybe farther along than the Union Docs lab, maybe mid-production or early in production, but have at least 15 to 20 minutes of material. And it was a little bit wider in scope. The Camden TFI Retreat does have to be American stories, although we're pretty expansive in terms of what that can mean and what that should mean. And you have to have more material. Generally, people are in post and would have 30 minutes of material. I would say it is invitation only, but the way that we invite working in partnership with Points North is we're always tracking projects. So if you, say, had applied to Tribeca All Access, or if you had applied to the Points North Pitching Forum or to pitch at the Camden Film Festival. Maybe you were a finalist, or maybe you were quite at a stage to be invited to any of those, but we're sort of tracking and keeping in touch, and then are keeping in mind that you would be a good fit for that. And then we also talk to our partners, so we may reach out to Christopher, we may reach out to Lucilla and ask, is there anyone on your radar who's kind of, this is the perfect time to really dig in deep over a week into the material. And I will say from the outside, having worked with a lot of producers in public media, in development or in co-production, I would see folks come out of this retreat and it would be transformational for their material, because to have that much time to really dig in. And I think also you'll learn from a lot of these, they're intensive, but I think what's nice about our retreat, you also get to go on a hike and you get outside, and sometimes that's where the ideas percolate, not just being at the edit bay or writing, but just having that downtime with each other and really developing that kinship, because I think peer-to-peer support is really important too. So those bonds you create with the other folks in your cohort also continue beyond that week in Maine.
Do you actually get feedback and edit and then show a new cut?
That's a good question. I would say at all of the labs, yes, you're showing footage. So even with the A&E, right away, people were really vulnerable and showing some early scenes, some that were like very sometimes loosely assembled, but right away that would immediately get folks into sort of a safe space to talk honestly and critically about the work. And that's an interesting point to be in, because you may be mid-production, so you still can go shoot when you're seeing how you're already approaching the material. I would say yes, there's footage shown throughout the week at Camden. Maybe Kirsten, I would imagine that like some pretty intensive scenes or shaping can happen over a week. I've seen that in other retreats. So,
and is there a fee?
No fee. We cover the costs. There may be some like local transportation you have to take, but we try to be mindful that often these things can be cost prohibitive. So in our fundraising, we're trying to take care of the entire cost that it would take to get you there. And I think this year, for the first time, we're going to have honorariums to offset the time, because you're likely taking away time from work and family to do this. One thing we're looking at, we may not be quite ready this year, but we're thinking about, is also if people have young families or families they're traveling with, how can we be also building that in? And that's something I'd like to see happening more across the industry, because I think it is really difficult if you're a single parent or a young parent, young just like your child's young, not you, but not missing out on these professional activities and development because you're thinking about childcare. I would say we have a long ways to go. True False did that this year, but I wonder if it's because one of the founders of True False became a father, so maybe it was more top of his mind.
How many people are in a lab?
Only 4 projects were in the story lab this year, and I would say we'll choose up to maybe 8 projects for Camden, 8 to 10.
Do you want to say anything about If Then?
Yes, thank you. So I would say that we have those labs internationally. Also, If Then is kind of a lab in a sense. So If Then is our newest shorts initiative. That is both pitching, and then if you win the pitch, you get $25,000 to produce the short film and a year of production and distribution mentorship with our If Then program team. So we have actually modeled, we have also, that's based regionally. Actually, folks would be eligible to apply if you're based or living in the Northeast, which I assume most of you are. For the Doc NYC, we'll be doing a lab, so that'll be opening up, a pitch, so that'll be opening up this summer. So you don't have to have shot anything, although often folks have, even in their sort of early scouting for a project, do have material to share. So, but they're doing a live pitch with a jury, and then even the finalists sometimes have gotten attention through folks in the audience and end up getting support to finish that film. But you get intense mentorship kind of through that process, and that is for emerging makers. I would say Camden is for emerging to mid-career, working on first, second feature, and then the If Then is also meant to be for emerging makers.
And what do you consider a short?
Those shorts, there was one that was about 24 minutes, It was about 14 minutes too long. But they were first-time filmmakers, so I think they were really in love with the material. It did finally get distribution, but I think they didn't quite have the festival run they thought they would, because that is a hard length to program, and then a length to find other distribution. But Al Jazeera English picked it up, which is great. Otherwise, they have been under 15 minutes. So we're pretty open to working with you and what you feel like the length of the short should be, but we're also thinking about distribution and partnerships and what's going to work in terms of if we think of it's a good film that we could potentially bring to The Guardian to be published there. They're probably going to want something closer to 8 minutes, and then they'll also have some editorial say in finishing that so it fits with a Guardian short. But then other ones have been most of them have been completely independent and then sort of find a life and distribution once they're premiering at festivals and getting seen.
And how many do you select for IF then?
So we do 4 pitches a year plus 1 international. This year the international one will be at IDFA. And the 4 regions are the American South, the American Midwest, American Northeast. And American West, thank you. And I'm a little low blood sugar.
And how many do you select?
How many do we select? We select 6 projects, 5 to 6 projects that will actually pitch.
Okay.
1 winner.
So, Lucilla, chicken and egg.
Let's watch the video first.
I think that someone should see this.
We have to make change! Yes!
The only way anything is ever going to change is if people can see us.
Come on, come on.
I have to know that I have done everything I could possibly do to keep that clinic open.
It's going to be a showdown.
That's good, you're helping me. I want to change the subject and ask if she was always such a great dresser.
Kaže, jeste se uvijek tako fino oblačili, imali stila?
Uvijek. I'm a rapper.
I'm a rapper. من فردام روشنه نخو غم من قول نمیخوام میدونم چیه سهم من.
Saya talaga kasay-say sa susunod ng anak mo eh. Nagkulang-kulang yung pagmamahal sa mga bata eh. Dapat bragpas eh.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. We have nothing to lose but our shame. We have nothing to lose but our shame.
We are constantly telling ourselves a story about who we are and where we're going.
This is the kind of work I want to do. I want to impact injustice.
I'm still strong.
I'm not going to give up this fight. This is what we have to do.
Thank you, Marcia, for the invitation to talk about our labs. Chicken and Egg Pictures has supported women filmmakers and gender non-conforming individuals for the last 14 years from all around the world. We've supported more than 300 filmmakers by now. And we have two programs that include labs, the Accelerator Lab, we just changed the name, and the Chicken and Egg Award, formerly known as the Breakthrough Filmmaker Award. We are in the process of launching two new programs, Shorts and Series program and Completion Fund. Both include mentorship and strategic planning for professional development, which is one of the very important focuses in our labs, professional development in addition to developing a project. I'm going to explain the Accelerator Lab first. Accelerator Lab is a one-year mentorship program for 10 projects directed by first or second time filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, and their co-directors can be more experienced filmmakers or men. We bring them together at 3 points throughout the program. There's a spring retreat and a fall retreat. We get together for a full week where we watch material from the program, from the film, we give feedback, and we also use the week to have professional development workshops, think about career, and think about wherever the projects are. Each year we tailor these. We talk either about fundraising or distribution or best production practices. We tailor it to what the cohort needs each year. In the spring, we see about 30 minutes, projects at our earlier stages, and in November, when we get together, we see some rough cuts, and some people will only have 1 hour assembly, which is fine. There's no requirement of finishing the project by the end of the year. And when they apply, they have to be at minimum 10% developed and maximum 60% at the time of the application, which is, the deadline is in June, so when the lab starts in February, maybe they shot 80%, but there's still time to go back and make some changes or shoot some more after we've seen material and we see if new directions need to be taken or more of some specific focus. And then in June, we bring the whole cohort to Sheffield Doc Fest. We have a 3-day retreat where we talk about projects, but we also focus a lot on pitch training. With a partnership with Sheffield Doc Fest, we have a live pitch for all the projects attended by industry professionals and other filmmakers. And we organize tailored strategy meetings for our filmmakers with specific representatives from the industry, or decision makers, they're called there. And then we have monthly mentorship, whether it's to talk about the project or production practices, or read a proposal, give feedback. Between March and June, we're very focused on helping develop the pitch. We really help people be ready to pitch and be confident, because it can be very nerve-wracking, and we want everybody to be in their best place they can be. And we also connect filmmakers to our network of funders and industry professionals throughout the year. We have donors we know are looking for specific subject matters to fund, and we try to make the introductions in the hopes that we can help raise more funds for that project. And in addition to all this, it's the cherry on the cake. It's not the main component of the program. We give a $35,000 grant for the project. And I specify that it's in addition, because many people apply because they want the grant. Everybody needs money to make the film. But this is for filmmakers who need the labs, who need the mentorship, who need cohort and community, and the money is additional to it. We disburse it in three installments. The first one is $20,000 right after being accepted into the program, and the other two are linked to deliverables after retreats or reports. We do it this way because by the third retreat, some people don't want to attend the lab, or they think they don't need it anymore, and there's people who really want the lab, and we created this program for those filmmakers who really need this support. And what else was I going to say? And yes, and that's that program.
How many?
For 10. The Breakthrough Filmmaker Award, or now Chicken and Egg Award, formerly known as Breakthrough. I do this because KJ was part of it 2 years ago. We've made some changes. It's also a one-year program for women or gender non-conforming individuals who are at advanced stages of their career. And it's also a one-year mentorship that used to be very focused on professional development and strategic planning, but now we added a component of helping support a specific project through creative workshopping during a lab, and also connecting the filmmakers to our network also for potential support, potential partnerships. We used to go to Sundance, then have a 3-day retreat in New York City, and then go to IDFA at the end of the year to also hold meetings with potential supporters. But now we eliminated Sundance, and we, the 3-day retreat in the city, and Sundance became one full week retreat outside of New York City, where we have a 1-week immersive experience where we workshop the projects, and we also have workshops on strategic planning for partnership with Creative Capital, and also other things that in filmmaking sometimes we don't talk about, such as workshops on self-care or finances, taxes, or depending on who the cohort is, working branded content or expanding your creativity towards narrative filmmaking. Our intention with this program is to support the filmmaker to go to the next stage in their career. Award-winning filmmakers who, through the program, can also plan and strategize about where they want to go next. And we want this program to help get them there or find the road to get there. There's monthly calls. One is one-on-one call with program staff, with Yvonne Welbon, and there's a monthly cohort call. Our intention with both programs is to create community and support with the cohorts. And one lab is great, coming together 3 days is great, coming together for 2 labs is great, but 3 labs, 3 times, is when these friendships are consolidated, and it also helps build confidence amongst our filmmakers. The Chicken and Egg Award comes with a non-restricted grant of $50,000 for whatever the filmmaker needs to move forward in her career at that moment. And those are the 2.
And what about applications? How do you apply?
The Accelerator Lab is an open call. We receive about 500 applications from all around the world. We select 10 projects. We open in May.
500 for 10 places?
Mm-hmm. That's the last year. Mm-hmm. And we were opening mid-May or towards the end of May, and the deadline will be 26th, 25th of June. So far, that's how we have it, but we're going to launch it soon. And for the Chicken and Egg Award, it's by nomination. We've supported only filmmakers in the US through that program for 4 years, but in 2020, we are going to do an international year. We want to support women at advanced stages of their careers in other parts of the world, to also help them build this professional strategy and confidence work, etc.
And how many in that program?
5. And we are in conversations about increasing it to 6, and Accelerator Lab to 12. We sunsetted one of our programs, the Diversity Fellows Initiative, which consisted of 1 lab for 5 filmmakers from, who were women of color in the US. We sunsetted that program for many reasons, so one of them is that it was for applicants to Accelerator Lab that didn't get accepted, that we knew we could help them through further mentorship and support, and they could be ready for the Accelerator Lab if they applied again, or just to introduce them further to the industry in the US. We realized for some it felt like a small prize. They didn't get the big one, Accelerator Lab. We realized we would like to support them more, increasing the number of filmmakers in the Accelerator Lab, but also we noticed that in the field there's a lot of organizations that have their diversity programs to support filmmakers of color or from diverse backgrounds. We are very committed to diversity, and we realize we do not need a program that's called diversity to support diversity. We are very committed. This year our Accelerator Lab is 90% diverse. Maybe next year it's going to be less. It happened. We really pay a lot of attention to who's telling the story and where they're coming from and what's the relationship to their characters and the place they're making the films about. So,
okay, great. So before we go to you, Kirsten, we're going to because you're the filmmaker point of view. Okay, so Milton, can you're up.
I will cut this shorter by saying I have no video to show. We have no video to show our labs. So I think a lot of you might know the IFP. We're most known for what's now called the IFP Week. Used to be Independent Feature Film Market, the IFF Film, the Market, IP Film Week. Now it's just IP Week. Spotlight in Documentaries is about half of that. Projects at any stage of early development through post-production, and that's much more an industry-focused, connecting projects to industry, and that's how we started 40 years ago, and that's still going on. Applications are open now for this year's event. The labs that we do started 15 years ago when Scott McCauley, who's editor of Filmmaker Magazine, came to the executive director at the time and said, you know, what is needed is something I see so many first-time filmmakers either submitting their films to festivals and not getting in, or getting into festivals and not being able to sell, or play regional festivals but don't go anywhere afterwards. And a lot of these people are coming from backgrounds where they are not plugged into any kind of network at all. They have no mentorship, they're coming from isolated regions, or even if they're coming from a larger city, they just they didn't go to film school, or they don't have the knowledge of how the business works to ensure that their film is ready before they throw it out there. So he said, so we started the very first lab, a very simple thing, very small outreach, and it was a narrative fiction lab. So the next year, we decided there needed to be a nonfiction component too. So the primary profile of the lab applicant, it's for first-time feature directors. It has to be your first feature. You could have made shorts. You could have directed, like some people have even done, you know, they have commercial work they do, or they have maybe been for hire on a TV series, you know, episode of a nonfiction. But this is the first your first independent feature. This is your first feature. Your producer can be experienced, or you can have no team. The lab is not just for the director, it's for 3 key members of that team. Each year there are 10 projects selected. Sometimes it seems like 10 is way too many, but it's definitely enough for a lab. The lab started out originally as just several days. It evolved into a week. For a number of years now, it's been 3 modules. The first module is kind of soup to nuts. So to apply, you need to be at a rough cut or rough assembly stage, or working toward getting that first rough cut. But ideally, before you've submitted to any festivals. We want to see a considerable amount of that rough cut, as much as you can show us. But we say a minimum of 40 minutes, because the goal is to get people who are really working toward finishing within a year. And we want most of the people in the lab to be about at the same place. So when you get into the lab, the first week is kind of soup to nuts. It's kind of evenly divided the first week between creative feedback on the cut to date. There will be an editing mentor, editing consultant assigned to each project, no matter whether you're editing the film yourself, you have an editor, or you have a fairly well-known editor. There's still another voice that comes in to give feedback. So about half is devoted to post-production. So for all of you who are making your first feature, you might have had a short. You might have had a short that went to festivals. You know how to make the post-production on what a short is, but it's just thinking on a much bigger project. So we go through the whole post-production process, what you will be dealing with in the next 6 to 9 months. Then the second half of that first week is much more focused on the landscape that you're going into. That's way different than it was 15 years ago. It's way different than it was 5 years ago. So it's looking at both festivals and what the festival landscape is, what the distribution landscape is in terms of theatrical, digital platforms, broadcast, domestic and international. So the first week feels like a lot of school. It feels like a lot of people are learning a lot of things about deals, sales, what a sales agent does, all of these things crammed into 1 week. These are all, it's not just us. We typically have experienced working producers as the lab leaders, and we call in experts in various fields to come in and talk to them. Generally not people who are in a place to acquire, because we're not ready to expose projects to that, but we do have sales agents come in to just talk about what it means. So after that first week, every project goes back because they know they're planning. Every project that's accepted into this lab then is automatically one of the documentary projects that will be in IFP week in September. So the spring lab is in May, and then they're going back, they're working on their projects, and you then come to IFP week in September. There's no real lab module during that week, but we're in touch with you before the lab so that you're most prepared about your materials, how you're pitching, how you're talking about the film, and what an actual pitch meeting one-on-one will go like there. So then after IFP week, there is another module, and that's usually either end of December or end of November or early December, depending on the year. And that is much more focused on marketing and distribution. There are general overview topics in terms of deals and other such, and distribution, more on distribution, because frequently people have forgotten what they learned in May by December, because it's a lot. But then it's much more focused on your project during that final module. Everyone has a 45-minute presentation that they give to feedback mentors in terms of that's presenting what have you thought about your materials, what is your visual, have you come up with a poster yet? Whether or not you've done that, you're still presenting, these are my ideas, these are my hope for goals for festivals, for distribution. How are you talking about your film? What's your log line? What's your synopsis? A lot of that is dealt with before IFP week 2, but you're going out to applying to festivals, or you're already out to festivals, many people by that time. So going back, I would say the other thing we're focused on a lot is goals, and to a degree, even though there are 10 projects, it's pretty bespoke. We have breakout sessions, we have office hours with individual producers and directors on their projects, but it's much more, and we're always bringing about, what is your goal for this film? Is your goal because your film is about an issue, and you're most concerned about as many people as possible know about this issue, and you're concerned about your outreach plan. Other people are concerned, like, this is my calling card documentary. I want people to notice me as a nonfiction filmmaker. I plan to stay in this field. One of your goals might literally be, I have a lot of people who are behind me on this film and a lot of investors. A lot of my plans are based around how this film will get out there in a way that will help me pay some of these people back. Anyway, so a range of goals. So a lot of it is about the goals. And the application, then the application process is a pretty standard application, logline synopsis, artistic statement, goals for the lab if you get in. And if we're not seeing the entire cut, what are we not seeing, so that we have a sense. I would say, well, we'll get into that if we have questions. So that's that lab. We also have a relatively new episodic lab that also, as of last year, accepts nonfiction projects too. Like the documentary feature lab, it's only 10 projects, so there will be a mix of fiction and documentaries in that. I'm not as closely involved in the episodic lab, but the goal in the episodic lab is for people who are looking to work in and you don't have to be a first timer for that. You can be pretty experienced, but it could be your first or second try at either a digital web series or you're developing a longer series for digital platform or broadcast, and you just want to learn how that whole pitching process goes. It's a very different industry than feature film. So it's learning, like, what is that landscape like? How do you pitch? How do you pitch to these people? How do you develop your idea? How do you develop the Bible? How do you, and frequently on nonfiction, you've already shot something, which is, and it's a different pitch, because in episodics, a company doesn't necessarily need to see a pilot at the beginning, but you can pitch them a different way. Ask me some questions.
That's new. That's really new.
That's new. It's been around for about 4 years. It had a different title. It's called Screen Forward Lab, and it was primarily focused on fiction. And the first year, there was maybe an animated film that was animated doc, and I'm like, that's a doc. And they was like, it's animated. And then the next year, there was another kind of hybrid project. And so finally, last year, they selected some
And is
fiction.
that because the industry is looking for episodic shows? Programming?
Well, episodic people are looking for it, and I think a lot of people do both. You know, some of the bigger platforms are looking for features. They're thinking of episodics, and it's a hot topic right now.
Right.
I would say we got more submissions for the Episodic Lab, and it helps that we changed the name from Screen Forward to Episodic Lab.
Really?
Yes, we got this year because of, I think they widened the criteria too, of like it could be an idea, it can be you already have a Bible, you've already shot something, it can be like a wide range. So it's more submissions than we have had for any lab project, so it's striking.
Wow. And one last question while we have you. If people want to apply for the IFP week, what stage should their project be in?
That can be anything. It has to be more than an idea. You have to have shot something. It can be a sample. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 10 minutes. It can be 15. It can be half of a rough cut. Generally, I say we like to see more. I mean, the more we can see, the better. If you have a short sample you've done and you have several more scenes, patch them together and send it in, because that, even though the lab might seem that it's selective because you're taking 10 out of a couple of hundred, then the IFP week is taking maybe 50 out of 4 times that many. But as I think all of us on this panel know, the documentary nonfiction space is a very rich space that people are doing very creative and different types of projects. So there's a wide range of types of nonfiction, and there are a good number of companies looking for nonfiction. So it's like, I didn't get in and we took 50 projects. You took 50 projects, well, but the level of output is so high, it's still competitive. So I don't know if we're getting into like what makes a good application or what we're looking for or anything.
That second round.
But yeah. So the applications are open now. We're looking for, it's a written application and a sample for IFP week. And I feel I do feel old, but I feel young too. But KJ has been connected to multiple projects through IFP week. I think Lucila's first or maybe second job in the States was being a coordinator at IFP week in 1996, seven, yeah. Monica had a project in IFP week years ago, and Chris, what's the matter with you? You did? When? Oh, okay. All right. I'm so old I forgot. Okay.
Okay.
I feel old when I remember I had to submit a digibeta to you when I was at IFP week.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have Kirsten Johnson representing the filmmaker's perspective. And we assigned her to Sundance, but since she has moved around, you can do whatever you want.
Like Milton is evoking, documentary is a long game, baby. And so sort of the good news of that is the pleasure of the long game. So that, you know, in watching all of these, all I saw on there was my friends doing things with each other. And so that you may be here feeling like, I have this project to make, I'm alone, I don't know anybody, how am I gonna make a film, I don't have any money, I don't understand this community, I don't understand this ecosystem. Industry, like there's an industry, who knew? So just like one, I'm just gonna say, I encourage you. You're literally the only person who can make the film that you wish to make. And it may be that you're making a film about some topic that is deeply meaningful to all of us in this moment in history. It could be that 7 of you in this room are making a film about immigration, but I believe that each of you has a very different film to make on that subject. And I would be really interested in seeing the movie that you are so deeply motivated to make that you stay in this long game. So I would just say, like, one, start by being kind to yourself, because I think this is all very overwhelming, especially if it's not, if you don't come from the world of filmmaking, if you're entering it later in life, or you're not a New Yorker, or whatever. I think it can be really intimidating. It's just like, what is this landscape? How do I do this with no money? And what's amazing about filmmaking is it activates different parts of your brain, right? So that you have like this part of your brain that's all about strategy and trying to understand this industry and how do I figure out when these applications are going, which has nothing to do with the relation you're developing with the people that you're filming with, right? Which is a whole other energy and challenge, which has nothing to do with what are the films that blew you away when you saw them and made you wish to make films. And your sort of aspirational self, which says, you know, I'm pretty lousy with the camera, I don't know how to record sound, but I want to make Apocalypse Now, right? Like, you know, I think we all, you know, that was me. That was what I was like, I'm going to make Apocalypse Now. As motivated me for 30 years, right? And so I think one thing to say is that nobody who ever made a film knew what they were doing when they started making it. Even if they went to film school, the films that matter to all of us represent people digging really deep into themselves and connecting with humans in the world who are in some situation themselves. So it's like this relationship of depth. And so one thing that I would just say to you is that I've worked with probably 90 filmmakers on feature-length documentaries. And I have seen people be first-time filmmakers over and over again. I have seen, and you say, like, why would I work with first-time filmmakers over and over again? Because some people who only make one film in their lives are making it from such a deep and interesting place, and they have such specific and weird relationship to something that they may spend their entire lifetime making one film. Or you take someone like Patricio Guzman, the Chilean director, and he's made multiple films about the same subject for his entire life. And then boom, he made Nostalgia for the Light. And you're like, whoa, that time you really got it. But so I think, like, you don't know who you are. You don't know if you're a person who's gonna make one film or 17 films or 40 films. None of us know that. And I think, so there's this incredible relationship to uncertainty. None of us know what's gonna happen to us historically. I was completely obsessed with racism, post-colonial history, African history, the history of terrorism in this like abstract sense, and then 9/11 happened, and suddenly my career meant that I was filming on military bases. I went to Guantanamo, I went to Yemen, I went to Afghanistan. So one thing to think about is that you're in history. You're in all of our shared history, but you're also in your personal history. So you might be saying to yourself, how am I gonna sustain a career in this field that seems to have seems to be no viable cash structure happening here, as we all know, right? But somehow people survive and make lives within this. And you know, one of the things that took me years to discover, probably half of feature-length documentary film directors have money from somewhere. It took me a really long time to get that. I was like, how do they do it? How do they keep making films when they have a 6-year lead on making a film? So, I mean, one thing that I think we each have to assess for ourselves is, what are my resources in my individual self? And if you know you don't have money and you gotta make money, then how do you play that game? And so that was me. I was like, okay, I could be a cinematographer, is how I could make money while trying to be a filmmaker. But what I did was, can I work on the most challenging projects with the most interesting people? And at every moment of my life, I felt like I was sort of expanding the story of filmmaking for myself. And one of the things that comes of that, I would say, is that instead of just being like, how am I going to succeed in this competitive world where they have 3,000 applications and 3 people get picked, it's much more, think of the ecosystem, think of yourself as in history, think of yourself as involved in relationships with each other. So here's this whole room of you who all believe you care about these particular labs. I could say easily, you could say 3 of you could meet at a bar and realize you have some shared interests and do something like what I've done for 25 years. I've had an art group, which is a group of 5 friends, and we get together for periods of time. We were doing it every month. Now we do it like probably 4 times a year, but there were 5 of us. We created this very simple format. Each person speaks for 10 minutes, and everybody responds to them for 10 minutes. And that's it. So it's a 2-hour block of time. And we learn, and you know, one of the participants, she was so afraid to speak in the beginning. You talk about like the terror of it. She could never speak for more than 3 minutes. And then she'd panic and sort of say, can you ask me questions? And now we can't stop her from speaking. But so when I think about my career as a filmmaker, but like more my life as a filmmaker, not my career as a filmmaker, it's always been about looking at many films, the films that exist, the films of others, the films that inspire me. It's been about finding the people who are my people. So they might not necessarily be a filmmaker, but they might be interested in post-colonial history. So they're a critic, they're a writer, they're somebody who's traveled a lot, and oh, I want to talk to you. I'm developing a vocabulary, we have this shared vocabulary, and you're going into your stuff. Like I do these weird things like make lists of the things that I'm really interested in right now that I'm trying to figure out. And then it's like figuring out who's asking those same questions, how do I find them? And this leads to like remarkable things, right? This leads to partnerships like my partnership with Laura Poitras, where like history came to us, right? And one of the things for me, I sort of was like, oh, who are the people who are in history? How do you get into history? And then in fact, it's like, oh, you know, it's actually happening, it moves through you if you are willing to engage with it. So, I mean, I think one, stop thinking of yourself as alone. Stop thinking of yourself as not able. Stop thinking of yourself as overwhelmed. Think of yourself as someone who has a relationship to pleasure. Because if you don't, your films are gonna kill all of us, right? Like, you know, it's like nobody wants to be told what to think. Nobody wants anything explained to them, really. Like, I feel like I'd like, you know, quantum physics explained to me, but like most things, I would rather engage in a series of questions, right? So I just want you to know, like, your position is changing all the time. Like I'd shot all these films of many different people, seen films go through these incredible trajectories of it's never going to come into being, it's falling apart. Somehow we did another rough cut screening and someone brought in one insight and boom, it transformed itself. So all these labs are places where people who are a part of this ecosystem really contribute and take the work seriously. And so there's like one set of people that I would say who form the ecosystem, like people like Milton who have been in this game, and like the level of commitment is insane. Like I can't even believe you're out tonight. Like, no, for real. Like these like people who just like, the whole commitment is trying to figure out like, how do I help people make their films? Like, you've been doing that consistently ever since I first met you, and you were kind to me in like 1996 at the IFP, right? Like, I had a feature film project. And we've always had, like, he was a big deal when I met him, and I was cordial to him and didn't take his time, but he was kind to me, right? And so just like think of like relationships. It's long-term relationships. People will remember if you were a selfish pain in the neck at a lab, and they will share that with their colleagues. So like if you're cool, like, and that's part of like how I had a career as a cinematographer, is like, I'm fun to travel with. For like, that's it. Like, I wasn't very good when I started. I didn't know how to do things. No, you laugh, but it's like, the number of times I didn't push record is considerable. So I mean, I think there's like this sort of thing of being comfortable with failure. So that means being comfortable with applying to things and not being accepted. And instead of being belligerent and writing nasty emails to people of why I didn't get in, like, think about, like, there are reasons why you didn't get in. And most of these people who are in the ecosystem get it. They've seen thousands of films. They have the context. They've seen 16 films on the same subject as your film this last year. And you, in your application, you had no idea that there were 16 other films about the subject. You thought, it's all me, baby. I'm the only one who exists. So like, I'm all about narcissism. I love hubris, narcissism. I love people who are bold and who are like, it's all me and my vision. Like, that's what we have to do in one weird part of our filmmaking brain. And then there's this other incredibly modest, open, gentle, kind, long-suffering part of ourselves that's just like, hey, like, maybe let me imagine that everybody else in this room has a more interesting project than I do right now. And let me speak to them with that kind of openness so that I'm not going at you, pushing my thing, but like, who are you? And let me find out who you are first, including the people who are part of the ecosystem. Because I think a lot of times we are like treating the foundations and the labs and all these things like they're ATM machines or something. It's like, I want from you the cash I don't have and this thing that's tailored to my needs right now. And it's like, hello, like, I mean, you're insane. Like, he created this whole other world of sort of, but it's true, like, it's like there was like a certain kind of documentary thing happening, and you said there was a lack of a different kind of film. I want to support that kind of film. I want to support writing about it, thinking about it, push the experimental edge of things. It didn't exist before you came up with that idea. So there's all these people who have this incredible interest and commitment. So, like, be respectful on a certain level of like the time people have put into the game, because they've really thought about it, they clearly really care about it, and when you interact with them, it's just like openness, humility, and flow back and forth, right? So my relationship to Sundance literally boggles my mind at this point, because I feel like Sundance is actually responsible for like all of the best things in my life, including my children, my love, and like literally like every single part of my life I can trace back to like, oh, that goes back to Sundance too. At one point I wrote this like really like teary, effusive letter to Robert Redford, like, without you I would be nothing. But because I think like the Sundance value, the values that Redford initiated it's really interesting. And part of the letter that I wrote to him was like, it was only him and George Lucas were sort of the only actors, director who thought of the community. Everybody else was like, how can I make another movie? How can I make another movie? But these are like two individuals who created these vast communities of creative collaboration, and who are really interested in how do I create a safe space for artists? How do I help people figure out how to interact with this ever-shifting world? Like, we've lived through so many busts and bubbles. Like, and it's just like, right now it's like a Netflix bubble, and maybe it's gonna be, if Molly Thompson is at Apple, we're like, oh, new bubble, right? But these things, they burst up and they pop, and then there's no money, and you show up with your film, and last year they sold for this much money, and this year no one's buying. And you ride this really crazy roller coaster that sometimes you're in sync with and you're total zeitgeist, and other times you just get like nailed by it. And so, I mean, I think it's like both sort of like keeping hope alive, having vision, having aspiration, saying like, there's nobody out there like me who's ever made this thing, I'm gonna make it. And then like, oh my God, there's hundreds of people who have put in decades of their lives to supporting and creating this community. And I use the word community all the time because it's like, it is a community. And the cool people in the community are people who share and who are fun and who like stretch themselves. And that's when you show up at a lab. So I've been to literally almost every Sundance lab that exists, except the theater lab, but I'm gonna get there. But you know, I've been an advisor at labs, I've been a participant, and at different moments in my career, right? So that at different times I've said, I actually need help again. I don't know how to make the thing I'm trying to make now, and I need help again. And I so admire both the peers, my peer group, and also the advisors that they're bringing in. It's just like, okay, if Mary Lamson, Jonathan Oppenheim, you know, tell me my film is pretentious, I believe them. And that's what happened to me when I went to the Sundance Edit Lab. Like, after going to the Composers Lab, where everyone was like, it's genius, I got to the Edit Lab, and they're like, this is the most pretentious film we've ever seen, and I cried in front of everybody. That's the safe space. So, you know, I think you can't, it's like all relationships. You can't force anything. You don't want to be in a relationship that you force. A love relationship, a parent-child relationship, any of it, like, you want flow, and you want back and forth participation. So trust, like if you want to make a film, there's a reason, it's a long game, and think about the flow between you and other people. And it's taken me on a pretty interesting river, I would say, at this point in the game. And I feel like, oh, I'm about to go into this really risky new territory where I'm afraid to show the cut of my new film to my peers, let alone my mentors, but I'm going to do it because that's what we're doing. We're doing risk-taking, and we're engaging with our shame and our hope, and that's what this sort of gorgeous set of people who puts this much energy into creating opportunities does on our behalf as filmmakers. So all praise to the films you will make.
So Kirsten, can you just clarify the difference between the different labs?
Sure. Of Sundance?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sundance,
Here's the list.
Yeah, so Sundance actually has been doing 2 edit and story labs, which happen in the summer at the resort at Sundance, which is just like Shangri-La, if you get to go there. I mean, it's a little bit like Camden, where it's like nature and mountain, and you get to ride on a ski lift and see animals and go to a waterfall. But they also keep you indoors a lot, and there's no lobster. But you also just feel it's like so thrilling to go there because you know everyone who's there has like skin in the game and has been doing it forever, and you really respect them. So it used to be there was invitation only. It is now open call, which is beautiful. Like all of these folks, they know the landscape, so they sort of know where you're at. They're looking for projects that have that are pretty deep into a rough cut, or you might even believe it's a fine cut, and then suddenly the entire structure of your film is gone and you begin again. So you go usually as a director and an editor pair. There's only 4 of them. So you can imagine this has always been a really competitive thing, and they've had 2 labs in the summer. They're developing a new lab that's oriented towards artists as individuals, not with projects. So that's a new way that they're thinking about it. They've had this Art of Nonfiction Fellowship, which I also experienced, which is a really sort of incredible new way of thinking, sort of what Milton was alluding to, of like formally the different places that documentary is going. Sundance is interested in pushing beyond simply these are issue-based films, but how do we push the form and the genre, and who are the people trying to do that? So that was also invitation only with 5 people. That's a year-long fellowship, which was like the time of my life. And what was wonderful about that was that there's an application project process that for the first time was visual. Like I sent them not video, but drawings and photos, and I wrote hand script. And so I'm impressed and happy that there's a core documentary application, because I used to do the millions of versions for every different. But I think there's something to think about, like you can always find a new way to express what your film is. But so Sundance then also has the Music and Sound Design Lab, which is at Skywalker, which is literally beyond the beyond as a human experience, because you're there with super talented composers and the best sound mixers in the world, with the best facilities and the best sound library, and you experiment. And you're in both labs, I would say that the idea is you're testing out ideas. You're not able to complete any work there, but you're testing out ideas and showing and sharing them with this group of peers. And so that happens in June. And then there's also a producing lab that's newly supporting creative producers, because as we all know, we don't have enough producers in this field who are independent of being directors. So Sundance is also trying to support creative producers, and that's a lab that is also an open call lab. So, I mean, I just think you probably don't know where you are and what you need entirely, and it's through the application process and the rejection process that you realize, oh, I'm not ready for that yet. And that happens with film festivals too. Like, embracing the rejection process is part of our craft.
Thank you. Before I open it up, are there any questions, any comments about the history of the labs, how they started, to give some insight into your organization that you'd like to share with us?
I want to actually follow up on that, because I want to add to what Kristen was saying. I mean, at Chicken and Egg Pictures, before I came on board, they were already giving mentorship and some labs here and there, but they were more informally organized. But one of the things that the team realized is that money is not enough to give to a filmmaker to make a film. There's a lot of need to help build community and build confidence. Like, if you feel like you don't know if you're going to be able to make this film, it's so hard, so much money, but you really want to make it, you're not the only one who's thinking that. It's hard, it's a hard process, and that's why these labs are necessary, and why the community, the sense of community, and that you're not alone in this is so important. And attending events where you can meet others who are going through the same. One of the first things we tell filmmakers for the Accelerator Lab when we come to the lab is it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I don't know what I'm going to do with this scene, or if this character works. I'll show you, and you tell me what you think. It's okay to doubt, because it's part of the process. And we accept 10 projects for the Accelerator Lab. It's tight, but they were not the 10 best projects necessarily. There were the 10 that we came down to that speak to us. But if we could pick the top 50, they were all amazing. And the top 300 had a lot of possibilities, but we have to cut it down. We don't have the funds to support more at the moment. But always getting feedback is important. Whenever you can, it's not always possible. Keep applying. Persistence is important. Every time you apply, your project has been evolving until they say, no, you cannot apply again, or you're ready to launch into a festival. And one anecdote, well, this has happened actually several times, but one specific anecdote is one of our filmmakers from the Accelerator Lab from last year was at the Sheffield pitch the year before in the audience with her first film. And she says that she remembers being there and thinking, wow, there's no way one day I'm going to be there in front of that audience with Chicken and Egg Pictures talking about my project. And she felt so like distance from that reality. She applied. The next year she was pitching. She was there. It's just you have to, you keep trying. You keep believing in the project you're doing. And it's okay to sometimes not know what to do.
And it's also okay to, I mean, you guys will kill me for saying this, but like, to not successfully pitch your film. Like, I never successfully pitched Camera Person. it was literally impossible for me to articulate it in pitch form. So I do think like and that's not to say like, oh, I'm out of the process, I'm not going to engage in the process, I'm going to try. I tried. Believe me, I tried, and I pitched it in several venues, and it was a flop of a pitch.
I will say, Kirsten, that I saw your hot docs pitch, and I told Marilyn, it was just like there was something in your voice, the way you talked about that picture, the movie you wanted to make, that I was like, I want to support this no matter what. So that's why I kind of pushed her a couple of years later, like, what's KJ doing in this film? It was like, she's taking a break, or it was about, I don't think she should, you know.
You were one of the only believers at that time. For real.
So do you want to, anyone else want to comment about the history of the origins of the labs? Chris?
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, I mean, NewsDocs, we call ourselves a Center for Documentary Art, and we always have. And the interest in documentary goes beyond discipline, so we are really engaged with film and video, but we're also really interested in other forms of documentary, performance, sound, the written word, interactive work. All of that has come out of Union Docs, and I think I was really happy to have Kirsten remind us of the idea of labs as a space for experimentation and as a space for challenging and learning, because that's what we really have focused on in the Union Docs labs is being a space where you can challenge yourself and also step outside convention and look for provocative new forms, because I think one thing that we're seeing more of is that documentary can come in so many different forms, and there's so much potential for success, but there's also an extreme amount of pressure to cohere to these certain devices that are so commonly used. And so the space that we're trying to create is always about pushing beyond that and exploring all the possibilities, while also not being completely idealistic or disconnected from your audience, and also understanding sort of the pragmatics of the field. So there's a good portion of professional development, but we saw that there's a real need for people who want to make work that maybe doesn't fit into sort of the conventional modes of storytelling, or what's happening on television, or what the streaming platform is buying, but still have a way to make a voice, to also find practical support in their work.
So I think you've seen that these different labs, and they're more than the people that we could gather tonight, have slightly different visions, are there to help you at different stages. So it's worth the research to figure out which one is right for you. With that, we can open it up to questions.
Hi, the mic's coming around. Who's first, Marsha? Pink or black? Fuchsia?
Color always wins.
Question for Monica. You mentioned.
Can you hold the mic a little closer?
Yeah, for Monica. You mentioned labs that were supported by companies like A&E or CNN. Does that come along with a license?
That's a really good question. No, I would say that they are essentially getting a first look, but there's no, they don't have like a first right of refusal to offer you any sort of acquisition or co-production or distribution deal, but it is that you are getting the eye of the commissioner or the executive producer. And I think it's wonderful that they're sort of supporting the sort of like broader ecosystem of film, even if it's not necessarily a film that's going to be for A&E indie films or CNN films. And I think also what happens in these labs or in these spaces is you're developing relationships that it could be like a future project that they may want to invite you to, or want to hear you pitch other ideas. So I would say that it's sort of beyond this project you're working on, it could be yielding future collaborations.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
I remember something Monica said. Because in addition to supporting the film the filmmaker is making, we also support the filmmaker, and to that You were saying that you're looking into supporting women with children. We are trying to do that already for our Chicken and Egg Award at IDFA. 2 of our filmmakers, 2 of the 5 had babies, and they came and they stayed in the house with the cohort with their babies, one of them with their partner, and another one had a friend somewhere else. But yeah, it's something that we're actively doing to try to, like, women don't have to stop making films because they have children. That it's ridiculous, or stop receiving the support.
That's
So I
great.
just wanted to add.
Great example. Yes. Wait for the mic.
Behind you.
For Lucila, you mentioned that the Chicken and Egg Award is by nomination only. Can you tell me how that works?
Yes, we do. We make a list. We look around the country, and in this occasion, we're looking internationally at people who are in different places in the industry that we know the field and know who's doing that. But that is not only in the main cities or the main capitals of filmmaking, but also in different parts in the U.S. in different regions. Who represent like either big film festivals or smaller, more community film festivals, filmmakers, producers. We don't say who are the nominators because we respect their privacy. We respect the relationships in the field they themselves have. We ask for we ask them to nominate 2 filmmakers. And I cannot tell you how to get nominated, but I can say some people call directly and ask why they're not being nominated. They meet the criteria, and then we can consider an internal nomination by the team. We want to include. This is not about excluding. This is more about like including all the filmmakers that could be good candidates for the program.
Yes.
Hi, I'm a graduate student here at NYU in the documentary film program. And we're currently working on our thesis films, and we're in the development kind of pre-production phase right now. And all these labs sound great. I'm just wondering what the application deadline is for each of them, given where we are in the process.
Well, they would be shorts. So that would, I know that Tribeca has a program specifically for shorts.
Are you explain more what you'd be looking for, like funding to complete it? Because my understanding is you would have the support and resources here to complete your thesis short.
I guess more the collaborative aspect of it and the mentorship. If any of the labs align with that, maybe some of the shorter ones, or I guess what would be suitable for us given where we are in our thesis film stage.
Well, I would hope you're also getting mentorship within your university. But I would say with an eye like on the horizon, post-university, because I would say these are for working filmmakers outside of school, because a lot of filmmakers don't have access to the sort of mentorship, space and equipment that you have, so that you absolutely utilize it to the max while you're here. But then that all, and I went to art school, I know what it was like to have all of that, and then all of that disappears. So what happens once you graduate? There is maybe, you want to develop that short into a feature. So then I would say that you would maybe be, for Tribeca Film Institute, you could be submitting it to Tribeca All Access, which is a fall deadline, because you want to develop, but that is for features, it wouldn't be for shorts. But your short may be like your calling card, because there's a lot of, lots of industry and programmers are at festivals and looking at shorts to sort of look at that as a next generation. Or you may pitch a completely different short. But I will say from a funder's perspective, and having worked in different organizations, that it can be tricky with the student shorts, because you produced it while you're at a university, so sometimes they share a copyright. We don't have to get into the details, but I would look at it more as finishing the short here, and then what is the next project, or do you see that there's more to research and explore within whatever you're exploring thematically or topically in that your thesis film?
And I'd also say, like, there's a Sundance DFP newsletter that every month is telling you all of the opportunities that are coming down the road. So there are a lot of places that sort of do a conglomerate of looking at, oh, here's all the things that are coming, so you start to understand what the rhythm of the year is and how you might fit into the rhythm of the year. So maybe get yourself on a couple of those different newsletters.
IDA has a good student rate, the International Documentary Association, and I would say that's probably the best clearinghouse for like all opportunities, grants, fellowships, and I would take advantage of having the student membership rate.
And if you remember from the proposal writing, if you're really serious about raising money, write down the cycles for an entire year of all the foundations, grant giving organizations, and create a plan. Okay.
Hi. Hi.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. This question is for Milton and Lucila. Have you found this last round of applications had a lot of personal films? And then for Kirsten, are you going to go the same route with your personal film as far as the funding as you did for Camera Person?
I think we always have a hefty percentage of personal films. It's actually one of my favorites, and I really love personal films that are creative, like very creative. But yes, I mean, there's a significant amount of personal films.
Yeah, same thing. I would not know if it's more than previous years or less. I think it's average. We always get a good number of personal films from different parts in the world. One of the personal films we have right now that is at early stages was at the Summer Documentary Intensive at NewsDoc. In fact, we've had several filmmakers who come from either the Summer Intensive or the Collaborative Studio. Not that I want to make a commercial for Christopher here, but it's true. It's true. Like, it's a really great way to start. Like, sometimes if you have to pay a fee before getting accepted into the ones that you don't have to pay, sometimes it's very worth it because you're at that stage that push will really help you, and it helps you learn also how to raise the $500,000 for a film if you put into it a couple of $1,000 or something that's going to help you like go to the next level.
I definitely feel things move in waves, and I know that there was like a real wave of personal docs at the end of the 90s, and I had shot so many of them, I was like, I'm never working on a personal doc ever again. So the irony of making Camera Person is considerable. But that was part of why I was resistant to putting myself in Camera Person in a literal way, because I'd worked on so many personal docs that I was like, Lord help me, I'm not going to cry on screen. Turns out I'm definitely crying on screen in my next film. So you go through these cycles with things, and I think what's important is like you figuring out what is so peculiar that you're trying to make, and honing in on that particularity, just going deeper and deeper into that. And when I was finishing Camera Person, I literally thought no one would understand it, but I was making it out of a deep need that was completely my own. And that felt like, oh, that was the advice they gave me in film school. It just took me like 30 years to integrate it. But that's what happens. Like we're each our own slow learners, and our blind spots are prodigious.
I have a question. What if, for a person like me, that making a documentary is like my fourth incarnation, career-wise, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but it is literally the story. It's not my life story, but it's the story of my life, and is actually quite timely to what is going on the planet right now. What lab would be a good one for me to get, my bearings, so that I do feel a little bit like I know what I'm doing?
Well, we have a program that's coming up in June called Documentary Fundamentals, and it's a 6-part workshop that is following from sort of early stages of production through to distribution, and we'll have an amazing lead instructor and about 16 different guests speaking, and it's very low cost. It's not a lab exactly, but I think it's a great starting point. And also, we do about 3 different workshops each month on different sort of focus points in documentaries. So looking at personal documentary, we had a workshop just 3 days on that with filmmakers who are specifically thinking about personal documentary, also essay filmmaking and investigative, and we have one this weekend on sound ethnographies. So those are potential resources as well. And I think IFP has some starting points too.
And your question also ties to what I was thinking about when Kirsten was talking. I mean, it is daunting to hear how competitive how many of these labs are. And I can empathize because I was in your place as a first-time filmmaker. And I don't think that's what the 4th iteration is great, because that's just more life experience you're bringing to the camera and to your story. But I will say that I benefited from kind of labs and fellowships that don't even exist anymore. I think it's always evolving to meet the kind of needs of filmmakers, and the industry's always changing. But I do think it's important to know that there are communities that are there for you. You just kind of have to find the like-minded community. Like, I was a member of NALIP, the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, and labs that they had and the media summit every year was where I really built relationships and found mentors that helped. And when I went to IFP, which was incredible, what was also hard is that everyone said, great, let's see a rough cut. And I was like, how do I get funding to get a rough cut? Then, had a fellowship and a mentor to get me there. But I would say that I'm excited about things like Brown Girls Doc Mafia, ADOC, the Asian American Documentary Network, Film Fatales. You do have to have directed one, but once you have, Film Fatales is another thing that's open to you. New York Women in Film and Television, this room actually is also your resource and your cohort. So keep showing up and finding other people that are like-minded, because I benefited from meeting women in Women Make Movies production assistance program in a proposal writing workshop, and then staying in touch and sharing notes on our proposals. But I do think sometimes it's that sort of movement that comes up that you have to find ways to push through when those spaces are competitive or can feel exclusive, and so you have to find other ways to bring attention. And I do think those sort of more grassroots approach actually can be really nurturing. And then they'll sometimes say, Iyabo Boyd, who co-founded Brown Girls Doc Mafia, will sometimes say, this lab's opening up, people want referrals, if you would like me to refer you, message me. Or ADOC has become a wonderful resource where there's veteran filmmakers, and then there's emerging filmmakers, and folks at every level are supporting each other to create more visibility for the Asian American documentary community. So I would say that throughout, there's these little ways that people are kind of pushing through, and I get excited by groups and movements like that. And that's where I sort of feel I can bring, because my sort of being able to tell a storyteller was only possible because of things like that. Being first generation, not having money, knowing I was never gonna make this happen, having family money. How do you do that in spite of all those things? But I really think there is communities out there for you. You just kind of have to find them and support each other. And I would say also, what labs, what films are you excited about, and kind of see who supported them, because it is likely that those funders or those labs, will see also a common ground in yours. People really do appreciate, I loved this film, I saw that you supported it, I think there's some similarity with what I'm trying to do. And I think that's a great entry point to someone that you otherwise might be a little bit intimidated because they loved that film too. And there's your connection.
I actually think that is an amazing summarizing moment for this panel. So thank you, Monica. That was really beautiful. And thank you all for coming. And why don't we all continue the conversation, networking and creating community at Phoebe's across the street. So thank you all, and hope to see you May 6th.
Oh my God, it's so awesome. I don't know. So fun.
The real nexus point. Right in the center.
They ambush you. I'm in the middle of shooting in the dark and I need to come up with something.
I have a piece of fruit in my bag too. I do get
Flown the water a couple of times already. But it's too expensive for me to keep flying him out. And he can't stay out here, so I need to find someone out here.
So give me your info and I'll send you some names. I'm definitely booked then, but I will totally send you hook you up with some people.
Okay, yeah, and I actually need a sound person too. I mean, if the person knows how to do sound, it's okay, but it's usually very complicated. It's a bunch of interviews.
Okay, cool.
And then one course.
I'll send you some.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
I know it's a total headache.
Yes. And look at our favorite places. That's so great. Right? I love it so much. I'm so committed. I'm not. I have to go to Joe's Pub for something. I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't.
All right, everybody, we have to leave the premises, and Phoebe's is waiting for us, okay? It's across, no, but if you make a right, and it's kitty corner. It's on 4th Street and Bowery. Yeah, it's not B-Bar, that's on one corner, and Phoebe's is on the other. Bar. And we're in the back. If you go over to Phoebe's, we're in the back. If you can't find us, that's because we're in the back. So let's go, folks. Let's go get a drink. Come on.
Should I go put your volume on? No, it's okay.
Oh, that's so exciting.
And this is my mentee, Cleo, and
Wow.
she was in your honored film class.
Yes, exactly. I recognize you. How are you? Good. I'm going to give you a hug. Huh?
Yes, I do. So I'm very excited.
Wow! Invite me for a screen. I can't wait to see it.
They will. And I really. I know. That's true. Right? That's a great idea. So curious about your film. Yeah, she's going. Yeah. I know. I feel like we should have lots of trips. Let me try my
I'm sure you don't. Oh, good.
What's your
You got me. Put my number in there, but you got me.
Okay.
Yeah. Come on, good. I am not joining you, so I'm not at family time. I just gotta go to my next damn event.
When is it?
It's a goodbye.
You have my number.
Too many good people in the world.
That's true. I wondered. I thought we were leaving. Have a good night. Take care. Bye.
All right, everyone, last call.